in regular session or open session for this board meeting. We've already started it and determined that there was a quorum present. Trustee Simpson is joining us via Zoom. So she is here virtually. So our next item on the agenda is number 4. We have public comments, and the clerk is going to run out and grab those real quick. So this agenda item is for public comment generally, but in the interest of time, we're just going to, those who are signed up, we're going to allow to come up to the podium and speak. And then there's other specific items in the agenda that people may have signed up for. Is this the general one? These are the only 2? Okay. Well, it looks like we don't have anyone signed up for public comments for agenda item 4, so we're going to move to agenda item 5. The first one under agenda item 5 is personal recommendations and report. Personnel, did I say personal? We don't want personal recommendations, personnel recommendations.
So Chairperson and trustees, before you is the personnel report and some recommendations. I believe we have Director Hamlin is here to answer any questions you may have, but just shares where we are with our last resignations and new hires.
Okay, any questions or comments or from trustees? Do we need to have Director Hamlin? Trustee Pearson.
I wanted to make a motion on the recommendation of the Corey Geddes, where it was recommended that he not be released from his contract. So I wanted to make a motion to approve the personal report with the release of contract for Corey Geddes, because he's already taken a job out of state.
Chairman, can we get a second before we go into discussion?
Yeah.
That's my motion.
Actually, well, there's a motion on the table. Okay.
And the motion is, again,
To let him be released from his contracts so he can move to Florida. He's already taken a job in Florida with his family.
And you're talking Corey Gervais?
Yeah.
Okay.
I believe the motion was to approve the personnel report, including the release of contract of, that's what I heard.
Yes.
Corey Gervais. Okay, so that's been the motion on the table. We can have staff to, I mean, there's a motion that needs to be.
I'll second it for discussion.
There's been motion has been seconded by Trustee Simpson. Any discussion on that motion?
I'd just like to hear more of what Trustee Pearson, what her motivation for that is.
Well, because I believe he's already taken a job out of state in Florida. And I know that we have released several last spring that were not even leaving the state and released them under contract. And I just don't understand why we can't allow him to do that. I think it would be the right thing to do. He's already got a job. He's already moved to Florida. And I just think we should let him go and be released.
So can we have discussion with staff also?
With your superintendent?
Yeah. Dr. Russell, can you provide a little bit more backstory to this?
Sure. Chair Kirkman, trustees, I'll provide a back story, and then may have Director Hamler come in and help as well. We sent out contracts at the end of June. Employees have 10 days in which to sign their contracts and to do that electronically. When you do that electronically, I believe there are 3 screens that you need to click that says, yes, you accept that you are going to be employed through the Napa School District. And our Mr. Gervais here did sign that when he was down in Florida, and then which committed to working for the Napa School District. Then I believe there was a phone call communicated because he asked to be released because he had found a position down in Florida. I think there was conversations with him about being in Florida. He was attempting to move down in Florida. He said that he signed his contract by accident, didn't mean to sign it. considering the hiring difficulties that we've had, we have shared that we, at this point, would not like to release, barring an emergency of some sort. And we informed Mr. Duress that we would not release him, and that we would expect him to hold to the contract which he signed. And then there was an email that went forth to the board asking to be released from his contract. And I shared a little bit more information along those lines of what I just communicated. And we looked at Director Hamlin. Did I forget anything that you think?
And also, what were you going to do if he left his contract? You were going to report into the educational.
We would. And so someone who signs a contract but does not honor that contract, then we turn it over to the State Department of Education and let them know that occurred, and then they would determine whether there was a ethical breach or not.
So a question for clarity, all these other contracts that we have released people that, who have been in contracts and let them out in the spring, have none of them signed contracts? The ones that we allowed to be released,
So
none
we,
of them signed?
Chair Kirkman, Trustee Pearson, we have those that have signed contracts. The ones that we were let out, I'd have to ask Director Hamlin specifics, but typically those have to do with, like I know there was an example where one teacher had a medical need from her psychologist that asked for her to be released because she could not work anymore. So she was released from a contract at that point. And that was all prior to the hiring situation that we're in. And I'm just trying to ensure that if we have people, we want to make sure that we keep those folks and sign the legal document that they offer. And so those contracts were released prior to the current hiring environment that we're in.
Superintendent, it's difficult to make a mistake in approving or in signing those contracts, right?
Chair Kirkman, Trustee Baye, I think 3 clicks is a lot. I believe it would be hard, I think, to make a mistake, because I do believe you have to click where it says, I can't look at the language. I'm looking at Director Hamlin. What is the specific language it asks for?
He keeps looking at you. You might as well come up here to the podium.
So, yes, you do have to type in yes twice, then you have to hit accept, and then you have to confirm that, submit it. So it's actually 4, type yes, yes, accept, and then submit the contract. So, yeah.
Has there been any other instances like this where they've signed the contract and then said, oh, wait, can you please let me go? Because I might be going somewhere else.
No one has said they have accidentally signed the contract. They admitted to signing the contract and then going out and maybe trying to find a job. Have we released any of those currently? No, we haven't had that.
So it's kind of using the Nampa School District as a placeholder.
Yes.
Okay. Any other questions, comments?
I just
I'm sorry.
want to, sorry, Trustee Simpson. Is it okay, Chair Kirkman? Can I just make a comment?
You're gonna get a lot of grace, Trustee Simpson, because you're remote. So I apologize if we interrupt each other, but you got some grace tonight.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I just want to reiterate the process. I know Trustee Pearson asked about, if we don't let him go and he chooses to leave, and then it would be submitted to the Professional Standards Commission. But I have participated in the professional standards process and kind of seen what that looks like. So I just wanted trustees to be aware that it doesn't automatically mean that credentials are pulled. It is then reviewed by that team, that committee, and people are brought in as well to review that. So I just want to make sure that it's not an automatic.
Yeah, Trustee Pearson.
I guess it's hard because I feel like we have released a lot of people out of their contracts, but it's hard for me to comprehend that none of them signed the contract, all these that we have released. Do you guys recall? There's been several that we've allowed out of their contracts, and it's hard for me to comprehend that none of them signed a contract and I don't know, I just feel like,
They did sign
They
the
did.
contract.
but we released them,
released them.
but we're not releasing this one person, but we released several others and he's moved to Florida. I just think it's
Trustee Taylor, you
not
said?
kind.
No, you confirmed it. You're correct, Trustee Pearson. We have let others out of contracts, but they have all had signed contracts. Yeah, so yeah,
Right.
And-
So why is he being singled out? When he's actually out of state, he's moved out of state with his family. Other contracts where we've allowed these people to be released are still in Idaho. They've taken other jobs in Idaho. And to me, would have been easier for them to not be allowed out than for somebody who's already moved his family to Florida.
I-
Trustee Pearson, just to clarify, one thing that we're trying to prevent is Napa being a holding place. What it feels from the conversation of speaking with the employee is that a contract was signed as an insurance aid, just in case there was no job while they were down in Florida shopping for a job. When the job was received, then they wanted out of that contract. What we're trying to do, from the administration's point at least, is to make sure that if you sign with Napa, that you commit to Napa, you commit to our kids, you commit to our schools, that you work here, that you don't sign a contract and then shop around for a better job until it comes and then ask for a release after. And that is, unless there is a very valid reason, usually medical reasons or something like that we had in the spring. And it is a little bit different hiring than we were in the spring season. So I think there are some of those variables in there, and that's why that recommendation was brought forward.
Okay. But if we don't release him from the contract, he's not coming back to Idaho just to work here.
Sure, Cookman trustee is correct. He very well can take his job in Florida and work through there. And the only thing that we would do is just send it on to the state, and then the state would make that decision.
And I appreciate Trustee Simpson's input on that process at the state level. If and when it does go there, they can still act accordingly as they would anyways. I mean, they could release that or do whatever with this certification or not, yeah.
Which is insane.
I also just want to clarify a little bit. I feel like, yeah, some have been released from their contract during the year, but none recently. I mean, we've had a lot who've like resigned where the contract wasn't ratified yet. So they hadn't signed a contract yet, but they just were putting in their letters of resignation, correct, in the last few board packets. Is that what you're talking about, Trustee Pearson, in the number of those?
I feel like there's been a lot of voting on both resignations and wanting out of contracts.
Yeah, and Trustee Pearson is correct. Over the meetings that we've had since January, there seems to always be some in the personnel report that they are requesting to be let out of their contract, and we've approved those.
Correct, but a lot of them have
That's
been
what she's
for,
referring to.
sorry, Chairman Kirkman. But
Go
a
ahead.
lot of them have been like a request for resignation for the 2022-2023 school year, and they haven't signed a contract for that yet. So I don't know that all of them had contracts signed.
Right. No, I think we all agree on that.
Yeah, so Chair Cookman trustees, we have let people out of a contract that they have signed before. I mean, that has occurred. It is pretty rare. We try not to. It's usually not best for students to have a teacher and then teacher leave mid-year. That's not ideal, but there are situations that come up where folks do need to be released, and we usually work through the employee the best that we can. Oftentimes that is done upon backfill, if the position can be filled, and then we would release. But typically, once someone has signed, we try to keep them. Now, this year, because of the hiring difficulties and the competitiveness, just the sheer competitiveness that we've had, we've asked that if anybody would sign, that we wouldn't release unless there was a what we would consider a legitimate kind of medical type need or something along those lines. And after talking with the employee, just felt like the employee was down in Florida, yes, trying to move, yes, trying to get married, do those things, but signed the contract as kind of insurance that he may have to come back. It would have been best had he not signed that contract, and then could have then reapplied for an opening here. But committed and wanted to, and then found another job.
Any other comments, questions to staff? Okay, well, there's a motion and a second that we need to vote on. Any other discussion on the motion? Okay, all in favor of, and we'll remind, clerk, will you read back the motion just to remind, because it's been so long since we heard it.
To approve the personnel report, including the release of contract of Corey Gervais.
Gervais.
Gervais, thank you.
So an aye vote would release this individual from his contract
And approve.
and
yes,
approve
and-
the rest of the personnel
Yes.
report. Okay, just want to make sure we're all clear. Okay. I will, all in favor?
I,
Any opposed? Aye.
Nay.
Nay. Oh.
Nay
Did
is-
you say nay?
Well, I was clearing you up when you said I.
Oh, as soon as you said nay, I heard it. And I thought,
Right.
what are you voting
So
for?
are you voting for I or nay? Because you said all
I-
opposed.
I said all opposed, and then I said aye.
It should be nay.
Nay.
So
I
can we
am,
do that
I
one
am
more time?
opposing.
Okay. please do.
And trustee Simpson, just to be clear, because did you
Trustee
vote?
Simpson opposed. Was a nay.
And trustee Valier, so it's 3-2. Nays have it. All right, next item
No,
is.
we still need a motion.
We're still gonna figure out what we're
Yeah.
gonna do.
that motion.
Chair Kirkman, trustee
sorry,
Simpson
yes.
here. I move that we approve the personnel report.
Okay, motion's been made. Second?
Second.
It's been seconded by trustee Valier. Any discussion on that motion?
No.
Okay, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
Can I speak to that?
No, you had your chance.
Oh, sorry. Perfectly fine.
Okay, so that's, that item is done. We're gonna move on to, oh, my apologies, trustee Taylor.
It's okay.
We're gonna move to activity procedure handbook for secondary schools.
Chair Kirkman, trustees, before you is our secondary athletic handbook for approval tonight. In it, you'll see a few adjustments. There's some around, some language adjustments around the procedure to challenge what's the word I'm looking for, complaint protocol. There's some verbiage around that. There's also a few date changes as well around eligibility, but the primary reason bringing this forward, this also has to do with a conversation that we had last month where we had concerns around priority for NAPA enrolled students. And so that language has been struck from this handbook. So there is no longer priority for NAPA enrolled students. Any student in the district can try out and can make a team. And there is no priority given to NAPA enrolled students for that. So that was the change that was made, and bring it forth for your approval tonight.
And we'll make a motion on that.
We have some public comments. So we do have a couple of people. Well, I have one person, I have 3 people signed up, 2 of them crossed their name off for this item. So Monica Murphy is in support of the change. Looks like she wants to say something.
Good evening. I just wanted to thank you. I know your time is valuable and this was important, and I'm grateful that you took the time to put this on your agenda and to vote either way tonight. It just means a lot to our family and to those that are supporting this motion. So thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Russell, just a quick question, a couple of things actually. When you say priority given, is that like the same weight will be given to any student in the district, whether they're homeschooled, whether they're public school, it doesn't matter. Same, that's what you're meaning by priority?
Chair Kirkman, yes, that is accurate.
Okay.
It was labeled priority enrollment underneath the previous
Okay.
code. We've taken that out. So now there is no priority enrollment. It is open to all students the same.
And on page, I made a couple of notes here as I was going through this. The 3rd page of this, I think this is what we're looking at. Okay. Yeah, it was just a time frame. I just want to see if there should be any clarification as far as when a parent decides, or if a parent decides that they want to challenge this. The most effective step concern the staff member, the coach, and then the parent should contact the team coach to arrange a time and place for the meeting. If that doesn't reach a satisfactory resolution, make an appointment with the athletic director and head varsity coach. At that meeting, they'll discuss. The only time a time frame comes in is when, in number 3, if there's still a concern, the problem should be brought to the principal within 30 days of the incident in writing. So my question then, I like the time frame. Is there anything before that should be in a time frame, so it doesn't feel like the parent is maybe getting, because the time doesn't kick in until it actually, I guess you got the date of the incident. So within 30 days, they've got to speak to the athletic director, to the coach, and then to the principal within 30 days. Is that how I'm reading that?
Chair Kirkman, I believe that is accurate. Based on my reading of that, it would be within 30 days, we have to speak with the coach, the AD, and then the principal within 30 days of the incident.
Okay, I just want to make sure that the parent doesn't feel like they're being strung out and it's taken forever and so on and so on. And then quickly in number 4, just more for, if concerns persist, then it should be submitted to the superintendent or designee within 15 days. Just clarification, is that school days, calendar days?
Chair Kirkman, trustees, it says 15 days, so I would assume that would be any day, school days and probably calendar days.
So just 15 calendar days of the principal's decision? Okay. Sometimes those can become tripping hazards. And
Chair Kirkman.
sure, trustee Taylor.
Just in 5, are we worried about the grammatical error where it says if the interested party still, that board policy has not been followed? It still needs to say if the interested party still feels that board policy, or like that word should still be there, just to make it a complete, accurate understanding.
Yeah, and I would assume the district staff would go back and wordsmith this, just make sure.
Just
that
making
it's
sure,
all-
yeah,
Okay.
just for clarification.
Chair Kirkman, trustee, David, thank you for that. We absolutely will go back through it, just make sure it reads more smoothly.
On the following page, qualifications for team membership, I just, again, more clarification, I want to make sure. It says in order for a student athlete to participate in the district or state tournaments, they must have been a part of the school team having to practice a minimum of 10 days prior to activities such as eligibility. And that includes, what if the student is homeschooled, didn't have the opportunity to practice with the team and now is on the team? I mean, I'm looking at timelines here. I don't want to exclude just because they didn't meet that 10-day threshold.
Chair Kirkman, this is trustee Simpson. I know that's like an Idaho High Schools Association rule that any student that participates on a team must have 10 practices in before they can participate in an actual event for that activity.
Very good, thank you. And then rushing, I think that was all the quick notes I had on here. And I appreciate the indulgence. Climate change. Cool. Trustee Pearson. You have anything?
Just a minute.
Okay,
Motion to accept the high school athletic handbook as presented for the 22-23 school year.
second. Okay, it's been motion, it's been seconded. Is there any discussion on that motion?
Chair Kirkman,
Yes.
sorry, I will wait for trustee Pearson and trustee Valle if they have comments, but if not, I have one comment.
I just want to make sure in that motion, do we want to add the edits for the calendar days in there, or the time frame? Just the calendar days, I think, is really what we owed. It wasn't specified whether it's school days or calendar days. And I think Superintendent Russell mentioned it'd be 15 calendar days. It's not that big a deal. I just want to make sure, because that's the last thing I want to argue over when the parent brings it to our attention that they didn't meet the 15 days.
Would trustee Pearson and trustee Valley like to amend theirs to include, including edits discussed? So motion to accept the high school athletic handbook, as presented with including edits discussed by the board.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. That was in
Do I
front
have
of
to say it?
We'll just include it in the motion. So there's a motion, there's a second. We're in discussion on the motion. Trustee Simpson?
Thank you. I just wanted to let you all know that I had the opportunity to talk to former Nampa trustee Rex Burmester about this, and he gave me some background knowledge on why this language was in there. And it started around the time that charters started to pop up in the state, and knowing like where finding a place for kiddos that were choosing to go to a different charter but still wanting to participate at a home school. And I appreciated his time and just knowledge and sharing of that knowledge with me. This one, I don't have a problem with all being able to participate. I think I spoke to that in our last meeting, but I just wanted to, the hard part about this is that the state doesn't fund any athletics or activities. And so the funding that the district generates for that comes from either supplemental levies, which some of our supplemental levies have covered activities items and equipment, but some of it we don't get funding because we're funded for the kids who attend our school. And so I know that's where this like catches. So just gonna make my push that I think it's important that we have athletics, but we should be talking to our legislators about putting that in our Idaho Constitution and then having the funding to back it up. And I apologize for my sick baby in the background.
No apologies necessary. Thank you, trustee Simpson. Yeah, we can make, I agree with you. It should be pushed to the legislature and get them to. Gotta be careful what I say because it's recorded. Any other discussion on the motion? Okay, so the motion is to accept the
High school athletic handbooks, as presented, including edits discussed by the board for the 22-23 school year.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, passes unanimously. We'll move on to the next item on the agenda, and that is sign-on bonus proposal. Again, Dr. Russell, this falls in your camp.
Chair Kirkman, trustees, before we talk around the sign-on bonus proposal, I just wanted to clarify some information that the board had asked in a prior meeting around just again overall around the special payments that have occurred in the past year. And so before you in the board packet, you'll see there are several special payments. One in December of 2021 that was given $500 to all employees, and then some partners were given $400. Those that kind of partner with us as the district. In April, there was what called the governor's $1,000 that was given out after the legislature approved some money for employees. And then with the negotiated contract, when that was finalized, you'll see there's some dollar amounts there that were given out to employees. And then just some other information around leadership stipends there for you to share that those were not given this year. That was one of the difficult things for the district. Typically, there was a large amount of money that was given for leadership stipends that wasn't given. So just wanted to clarify that just so that it's clear what payments were given out. If you recall, last board meeting, there was a proposal from the administration to perhaps do a sign-on bonus to encourage folks to sign on to the district, considering that we're trying to find positions. And Trustee Valle asked me a very good question. Yeah, he said, Superintendent Russell, do you really need to do this? And at the time I answered yes. Well, I'm here tonight to tell you I changed my mind. And that is after just some deeper thoughts and thinking through and talking to some more folks. There's a couple of reasons why I believe maybe right now may not be the best time to do a sign-on bonus. The first one's timing. And as I was thinking through this and talking with some folks, they mentioned usually a sign-on bonus is trying to give it to the absolute best candidates. And that this is late in the hiring season, and it might be wiser for us if we were to do something like this to maybe bring it back in the spring. That might entice, more likely to entice better candidates in the beginning of the hiring season when it's there rather than later. And so that thought process kind of crossed my mind. The second one is that while the district was making really good progress, it has been a little bit more stagnant the last 10 days. But we were making some progress and we would like to continue, hopefully, do that. And I was talking to some administrators today that were hopeful of hiring a few positions even today. I'm trying to offer fairness. I think that, the board wrestled with this last time. I'm talking through of what is fair for someone who was hired early or hired late, or someone that stayed on with us versus someone that just joins us. And that's really hard to wrestle with. I think the administration had difficulty with that, still do. And so that was just another reason. And then the last one, I know Trustee Taylor had asked us, have we discussed this with other districts or reached out? And so I did reach out with the SIC superintendents around, and we are the only one within the SIC that would be considering that. I guess West Ada had some discussions on that, but hasn't done that. I believe Clerk Lamont had mentioned maybe a smaller district. I want to say Notice possibly.
Marcy.
Was willing to offer that, but that's the only district that we can find around that. So for now, we think our energy is best, but it may be trying to hold off for now and maybe do this in the spring if we need to.
Okay, so are we looking at no
So the recommendation.
recommendation?
Chair Kirkman,
I was
trustees,
about to
sorry.
do my own
The
recommendation.
recommendation would be no action taken at this time.
Any questions for staff, trustees? Trustee Simpson? Any questions? Comments?
None from me. Thank you.
Well, we will take, do we need to, we don't even have to vote on no action, do we? No, that's it. We'll thank you for the information.
Yeah.
Trustee Taylor.
Yeah, Superintendent Russell, I just want to say thank you for following up on that and then going through those motions yet again.
So everything stays the same. We will move on to the next agenda item then. Next agenda item is standard-based grading policy number 2620, grading and progress reports.
Superintendent, I already added that document.
This one.
I'll push save.
Dr. Russell,
So
What was
Chair Kirkman,
yours?
I wasn't sure if there was public comment or not, so that's what I.
let's have you go first and then we'll take public comment.
Yeah, so Chair Kirkman, trustees, tonight before you talk it through standard-based grading, what we'll do tonight is we'll have Mr. Yarborough will come up and talk a little bit around some of the concerns, a possible proposal. Then we'll go through the survey that we sent out. There's important information, I think, for the board to consider within the survey there. And then allow it to the board to open up for some discussion on that. So I'd like to turn the floor over, I would, to Mr. Yarborough.
Chair Kirkman, trustees, thanks for your time tonight. What I do have, Sam, you have the PowerPoint. Can we run that? I have a quick PowerPoint to just kind of guide conversation and kind of give an update of where we are. If you remember the last time we spoke about this in a board meeting, I believe we talked about having a work session coming back. So some of the things we prepared are kind of in that vein, obviously knowing that this is more of an action item tonight. One of the pieces of the PowerPoint that I'd shared, I don't know if you had a chance to look at it. There was a video prepared by one of our school staff, Aaron Moiso. And
Mr. Yarborough, I'm sorry, I think you have the wrong PowerPoint placed on.
that's not the PowerPoint.
It's
that I
already
gave you.
loaded into the document. Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. If you go to board docs, it'll say 7:15.
It's the SPG PowerPoint 7/15/22 board packet.
Thank you.
You were on it before, you were on it already.
Down,
Yeah.
down, stick it down.
Down a little bit. Going,
One more. Sorry,
sorry about that.
that's okay. So again, one of the slides that we prepared and shared in the board packet was the video by Mr. Moise. It's kind of lengthy. Trustees, have you had a chance to watch it?
Yes.
All right, we're not going to go through that piece for sure tonight. So that was my first piece, and it speaks to the why behind standards-based grading. And again, if you'll transition down the slides for me, we're not going to do this video piece. It is available on our district website, so anyone can see it. It's been around for about 4 years. When Mr. Moise originally prepared that video, it was to talk about the idea of some of the challenges of grading systems and what the district was facing at that time. It does give a really good rationale and refresher about why standards-based grading. So anybody who would want, I would highly suggest you look at that if you have any questions. One of the other things we wanted to talk about briefly was why standards-based grading and why do that. And I think as you'll see with the results from the survey, that's one of the questions that comes up. Why do standards-based grading? Well, first of all, because as we talked about a little bit last time, the 21st century is seeing education shift that way, and our kids need that type of education. It's continuing improvement. It's driven by best practice, driven by research. Secondly, the traditional grading system, although there are pieces that are very understandable, has proven to be problematic as well. And so there's this piece of looking at something in our system that isn't working and trying to address and trying to serve all students within that. The traditional based grading system, if you look at the history of that, it goes back to basically the 1860s and some pieces behind that and what that traditional based grading system did. One of the challenges we have now is, and we talked about it again last time, is what does each piece of any grading system need in getting to clarity? And that's a hard piece. That is the point of standards-based grading. And while admittedly, we are not where we want to be as a district by any means, and so I want to make that abundantly clear and highlight that. Standards-based grading does support clarity in giving what kids know and are able to do. And why that is so important in today's educational landscape is to intervene where a student needs help. If we don't find out where the student is struggling from a learning perspective, that really handcuffs our teachers and their ability to give the appropriate intervention for a student to be able to move forward and to give the right type of intervention to support their learning. So that's just a brief statement of why SPG and why you know that. Yep. The challenges faced and struggles so far. One of the biggest things, there's no way to beat around the bush. Implementation, the time was a confluence of all the worst things in the world. We started standards-based grading in the fall of 2019, and as you recall, we had COVID hit the world in March of 2020. So while we were working on something that new that was going to be challenging in a perfect world, it became very, very difficult in all the factors we faced. That's my first bullet point there. The implementation timeline was very disrupted by the pandemic and being in remote for an extended period of time. That caused significant challenges in our ability to communicate with families and to discuss standards-based grading and to help with that communication of how grading systems change and what we were trying to do as a reporting and grading system. The other challenge is the new language of communicating to students and specifically to parents about student progress and learning, not grading. Again, not to beat a dead horse, we spoke about that last time. What does an A or a B actually mean? This is an attempt, again, albeit not where we want to be yet, of clarifying what your student knows, where they need to go next, and how they're doing on what is put in front of them as far as assessments and where they're at in their learning. Finally, the challenges of a reporting program and learning management system integration. Right before the pandemic, we had met because the previous grade book, which was Unified Classroom, which is no longer being used by Pearson Technologies, which supports our school. We had used that and it was causing some significant challenges for how we could use standard-based grading. So we looked at a number of programs and settled on Otis. The reason we settled on Otis is a district that promised the idea of not only a learning management system, which is very important in the 21st century world for students, but also a grade book and grade book capacity. That has proved to be a much more difficult challenge than we have been able to do. Going down, okay. Again, so that's a piece of where we are, where we're at. These are some of the misconceptions or possible misconceptions of some of the challenges we have. Again, when we look at the survey data, I think you're going to see very much the same type of things. One of the perceptions is that traditional grading was more aligned. And as Mr. Russell, or excuse me, Dr. Russell spoke about last time, that was not true. There was an audit done in our district, and in our district at the secondary level, I believe the secondary level, there were 25 different ways a student could earn a grade in a class. That's not aligned. That's not aligned in the system. And so this was an attempt again to get more to alignment on that. A couple others, student-based grading is harming students. That comes from a big perception of that it challenges GPAs and challenges college admission rates. We did some research since our last meeting, talked with a number of universities, not only in our state, Division I schools outside of ours. Up to 30% of students coming into schools at those levels are from non-traditional based grading systems, including international students, including international baccalaureate and others. So it is something that is happening. It is something that education is doing that way. Last two, standards-based grading promotes students not turning in work. If you had a chance to read through the teacher handbook that we prepared and materials there, that obviously is not the intent. And while I would argue, yes, we have the challenge of students not turning in work, that is not a standards-based grading issue. Students have not turned in work since all of us were in high school, and I would argue since the 1860s when the traditional grading system started. That's not a standards-based grading issue. It is an issue and one that we need to address, but it's not a standards-based grading issue. Finally, everyone dislikes standards-based grading. As you'll see from the survey results, that's simply not true. It's not as big of a percentage as are frustrated or extremely frustrated, but we do have some people that are very satisfied with standards-based grading when you look at our secondary schools, both the high schools and middle schools, as you'll see. So that background leads us to what we talked about. And Chair Kirkman, you asked in that last meeting, what would be a compromise or what would be a way to find a way through this? So this is a proposal that we would like to do as district administration. In particular, I would like to lead this work. We know that standards-based grading is a challenge. We know that it's not implemented the way that we want it to be. Making a decision on July 25th as school starts in less than a month will cause significant disruption to our grading system, our reporting system, and a number of pieces of that. So our proposal is to ask for some time to work with and to develop a committee of parents, students, teachers, administration, to really look at and define a timeline to look at some very specific markers for success. If we can do this right, we can still bring standards-based grading around to a way that supports student learning, that we believe it can, and find ways to give parents what they need, particularly communicating grades in a method that is easily understood. Part of this proposal will be to shift to every 2 weeks, putting a letter grade into PowerSchool where where parents do have it easily accessible. We would still be using at this time Otis as a learning management system where teachers are doing that work, particularly for this reason. We have a contract with Otis for 1 more year, and to get rid of that right now would be, while a struggle, we would lose a learning management system, and it probably wouldn't be a great use of our fiscal resources, knowing that we're into that contract for another year. This would buy us the time to determine, is that a tool that can be used as a learning management system and not a grade book? And can we go back to a grade book that our community is familiar with, our Teacher Pro, and communicate in a way that parents do get better communication from teachers about where their kid is and how they're doing within their learning. What we would propose is starting early next month, we would define that committee, get it together, work with the board, probably have a board member on that committee, define a timeline, parameters, and what success criteria for implementation of standards-based grading at the high school level would be. Again, we're looking specifically at the high school level. Within this proposal, we would really propose that you leave standards-based grading in the K-8 area, leave it as is, because this group of freshmen right now coming in next year is the first group of kids that have had only standards-based grading within the Nampa school district system. There are 2 middle schools where there's a group of kids who haven't had that, particularly South and West, only have had 1 year of implementation of standards-based grading, but East Valley and Lone Star, those kids have only known standards-based grading since they walked in kindergarten. So it's not perfect for that cohort, but it's very close to being that. We would like to meet from October through February with at least monthly, if not bi-monthly meetings to determine how we are doing in meeting those measures that the committee determines would be success to using standards-based grading as a method for supporting student learning. And then finally, we would report back to the committee in March of 2023 for a decision on what are our next steps. What do we do with standards-based grading? Were we able to shift that implementation dip to get it back to where we are making progress? And that will be our proposal and hope. There are a couple other folks here tonight that I would love, if you have any questions, would love to speak. Mr. Corey Wilson, who is the principal of Columbia High School. I know he has a student here. We have Miss Ashley Lovers, one of our elementary administrators here as well who could speak to standards-based grading. We have a number of administrators who couldn't be here tonight. A couple of them are sick and can't be here. And just want you to know that there were some folks who wanted a chance to speak with you. And I would stand over for any questions or ask Dr. Russell if there's anything else he'd like me to address.
Got a couple of questions since you brought them up.
Yep.
So how much is Otis costing the district right now?
That is a great question. I believe Dr. Russell can speak to that.
Chair Cook and trustees, the Otis contract for this year, I believe, is $114,000.
So that would be the third year also next year. So if we're, if,
This is.
Go ahead.
Chair Cook and trustees, sorry, this, starting in July, we are in the last year current.
okay.
So it'll end next fiscal year, June 30th.
And if we cancel that contract, we'd be out 114,000.
That is my understanding.
Chair Kirkman, trustees, there is in the clause, we would have to do in writing, let them know 30 days in, and I think we'd have to have our legal just to review that. It's possible that we could try to recoup some of that, based on my reading of the contracts. I think that's a possibility. We'd rather have legal review that and get some more suggestions.
Sure. You brought up, Mr. Yarborough, about, could you go back to the concerns about?
They can slide
It's all right.
forward.
Yeah, just.
Sorry, slide
Right
back.
there, yeah. Traditional grading was more aligned. How are they not aligned? This is one of the misconceptions.
Correct.
What does that mean? How you had 25, you mentioned 25 different teachers doing different grading. My question is, how can that grading system not be aligned?
So very, very easily, I can give you a number of ways, and I can give you the number of ways in 6 years in the classroom I did it that was never the same. Extra credit causes significant challenges for looking at what a student actually knows and can learn. Secondly, within a school, in educational research, one of the biggest barriers to student success isn't alignment from state or alignment even from school district.
Right.
It's alignment within schools and from classroom to classroom, right? So one of the ways to try and align that to the extent you can is to get down to really understanding how are we teaching standard X, whatever that standard is. How are we assessing standard X, whatever that assessment is.
But with all due respect, isn't that what we're doing now? I mean, isn't that what we do with traditional grading anyways? We have standards that have to be met and they have to be assessed and they meet all those.
No, because I could say in my classroom, well, I'm going to give 10 points to that, and you could give 100
But
points. to
I'm
that.
saying, why can't that be consistentized throughout? I don't know if that's a word or not, but you understand what I'm saying.
I appreciate that perspective. And then it gets back to you again, because I can put in other assignments. I can put in other ways, unless we go down that road and have a very specific type plan on that. That is the challenge of grading. The human element of education is that. What I would offer, I know Trustee Pearson, in the medical world, one of the advantages the medical world has is blood work. It's a hard science fact. Learning isn't blood work. Right. And so that visibility of the learning is something we're attempting to get better at. Again, whether we're there or not, I agree with you or not.
I totally understand where you're coming from. And as I read through this teacher's handbook about the standard-based grading, that was one of the things that it was a constant theme for me throughout as I was reading is, shouldn't we already be doing this in traditional grading? Doesn't standards-based grading open it up to more subjectivity? I mean, that's just some of the questions I had. I'm not saying it does or it doesn't. I'm just.
I do think that is one of the possibilities that can happen. And the conversation around that is the way to get more calibration is to get teachers talking more and aligning more. Standards-based grading does cause that. Where I say, hey, here's the test, here's a 100-question test, we all give 100 points. Okay, great, your kid's got an 82, my kid's got a 78, and we move on. The next step down is what questions did they miss? What questions did they miss and why? What parts of the standard are we not teaching well? So there are pieces of that whether you're in traditional based grading or standards-based grading, yes, we need to get better at. And the world as it existed in the information age, which all of us grew up in, is no longer that. Information is coming at you a million miles an hour now. Now learning to filter information, learning to understand bias, learning all those things, those are skills that our kids have to be taught for the 21st century world. And standards align with that, teaching the standard to understand a text, to look at it very complex. I'm not saying that there aren't people that can do great teaching in a traditional based system. I do know that the field of education is going that direction as a field of study, as an expertise, and that's where we're headed. So,
Chairman, if I can,
Absolutely, trustee Barry.
we're all a product of the regular grading system. I think we all turned out pretty good.
Speak
I
up.
hope we have. I mean, I just don't see what the unfairness is of that was in that system, because I probably never felt it. And I came to this country not knowing how to speak the language. I came to this country with I had a lot of different experiences, a lot of people have. But I still felt like my motivation to want to, and having that one teacher that helped me out. Not helped me out, but motivated me to do the work. Made all the difference in the work in the world. But let me go back to a few of the things that you said. You said that there were 25 different ways to earn a grade with the previous system.
that's the information I've been given, Professor.
Right.
Yes.
25 different ways to earn a grade. And it's a consistency that teachers were not given. When you let everybody loose, everybody will grade how they see fit. 25 different ways to earn a grade has a lot to do with the management of the school system rather than how that grading system works. Second, you are talking about 30% of colleges, of universities, of
No.
high.
Can I clarify that?
Yes.
30% of incoming students
Okay.
are not from traditional base grading systems. That was the comment.
And how long has that been like that?
I,
How do you
I,
know if it's growing or if it's
we,
dipping or if it's?
we
level?
can't see it increasing. We can't see it increasing because that's happening. But we're getting more international students and things along those lines. I can't tell you, and I could ask those questions for sure.
But I always look at the cup being 70%. You know, 70% are still using this old grading system, right? Is that what we're talking about? Also, sorry.
You're fine.
You're talking about extra credit and all these different things that made the old traditional system just be very scattered, right? Everybody did their own things, but again, I go back to just trying to figure out, this is something that we can align ourselves, right? That each school, each principal, even the district can align it. So let's not give extra credit then, you know, if everybody's using it, or let's just give 2 for whatever. You know, you can find a way to actually take control. And it almost sounds like you're saying there's no way to control the old system. And I know there's got to be some type of an evolution that needs to take place because the times are changing. I get it,
Agreed.
you know, but I also, in my mind, I just can't wrap around just the fact that instead of improving the old system, we totally changed it. And I mean, I know you look at these things as success, but I still see it as, if I was graded on this survey, I would fail. Maybe not with standards grade, you know, but under the regular system, this is to me like, I'm not doing very good.
Oh,
Right?
true. But may I address 2 comments?
Mhm.
I agree with you on that. And again, the context of when that happened, I think directly relates to those survey results. there is no doubt that all organizations experience when they come in contact with a new innovation or technology, there is an implementation dip. That's very standard in business research, medical research, educational research. Our challenge is the implementation dip has been lengthened by the confluence of when we introduced standards-based grading. And if we had a perfect world and we're in that spot, I agree with you. That's something that definitely needs addressed. And that's why the proposal is to ask for more time and hopefully a more quote unquote normal experience to work with our stakeholders. Because what happened is not only did we take away the grade that was easily communicated in the letter grade and what people felt a sense of comfort and a sense of certainty in, we also weren't in school and we weren't here, we weren't there, and all of those things contribute. And this is, I believe, one of those outcrops of that in conjunction with it is a hard change, it is a shift. And the last one, and this is not to be facetious in any way, I agree with you. We're all examples of the traditional based grading system. And every one of us wants something better for our kids. We want our kids to be better than we were. And so that's one of my thoughts. And I have 3 kids in the system. And I love the idea that they're being graded on standard because I can talk to every one of them about how they're doing and they can tell me what they're learning and what they're not learning. So I would just offer that as, yes, I agree with you. And I'm not by any means trying to be facetious. And I would say, I really appreciate the way we're going with my own children. So,
And I like the, I mean, and that's great, but a lot of the emails we've been getting that are on file say otherwise.
sure.
So, and that's the crazy thing, because we have one group of people telling us this, and a lot of the people that actually are on the
Right.
battlefront.
Right.
Because you guys are like right here commanding, but the battlefront saying, dude, there's something going on here. I don't even know what's going on. I don't understand it.
Yeah.
You know, and that's the problem.
Yeah.
And I know we can blame them. I know we can blame a lot of things on God. But
And I wouldn't like to call it blame. I would like to call it the circumstance that happens. And I really believe that. I would, Dr. Russell or trustees, if you, Mr. Wilson, he was here to speak, I've learned to educate from him. So I would say if you have any questions, he would be a great person to talk to as well. And I'm more than happy to answer any of the questions you might have for him. So.
Okay. Just quickly, will you pull up I'll give you time, a lot of lead time, pull up a 3-minute clock timer. And so when we go into public comment, we can have that timer ready to go. Dr. Russell, is there something that you would like to add, or do you want?
Chair Kirkman, trustees, no, good questions. I think I shared earlier, the number one way really to increase student achievement is reducing variance. And whether that's variance in instruction or variance in what is taught, how long is taught, what is learned, and what is assessed, that's part of it. We are in a standards area. That's why standards-based grading has come, because you're teaching certain standards, you want to be able to determine whether students are mastering those or learning those standards or not. But the comments around, do we need to get tighter on grading and assessment practices? Yeah, absolutely. That's something the district can work for. And the district has spent some time doing that for a variety of years. I think there's a book that we did years ago, like in 2006 or 5, called 15 Ways to Fix Grading or something like that, that there was some book studies done. So the idea has been around to try to create more conformity around grading. And that's something that if the board would like the district to do, we can try addressing that. And standards-based grading was one way to try to address that.
Okay, Trustee Taylor.
Yeah, I think that the hardest part I have really wrapping my head around this is that we give a 1 to a 4 a grade anyway. So as much as I like, it's so difficult. So I did a lot of work on this, and the problem really has been failure to launch here. I think that Mr. Wilson, who does a phenomenal explanation of like, he just does, but I spent a lot of time with Mr. Wilson, and so it's always appreciated. But what I'm finding it really hard is to say here is that for some reason with this conversation, if I'm having it with an educator, the standards way of teaching has to go out the window if I just need a communicated grade. And those two things just really shouldn't be the same. So I've had the hardest time having this conversation altogether. I think that with Corey, when he really talked about a level of mastery where it totally makes sense for us to look at those standards, and it feels as if we should have been all along, but we have to take into account, even with what the survey says, that we're causing problems at home. And there's no need for us to continue to do that. We've done that for a while now. As a district, my kids are all in this, which you know, like, yes, you have all my children, unlike you. But that being said, I think that the conversation has to be brought in saying that I think both are truly obtainable. And so that's what's really hard about this conversation is that it almost feels like there's two sides when realistically, the standard should still be taught. We're still looking at what the kid is learning, you know, if they're learning in algebra, it's really not a free for all. So if we present it today in this meeting and we go away with standards-based grading, and it's presented that we're going back to a free for all, because we're really not, because standards-based grading isn't being implemented everywhere the same, just like traditional grading wasn't either. So I just want to make sure that we're having a very real conversation, because I do think that there's a lot to be understood. And I think I've really learned to understand standards-based grading in the way that you guys are presenting it as a teaching tool. I think that there's been more collective cohesiveness amongst administrators. I think that you guys as a whole are looking for ways, especially with like your co-teaching. But I also think that there's a way for us to do both. And I think that that's where the conversation has to really go, because we have to provide these families tools to communicate with their children. So these families, regardless of whether people feel like it's outdated, it's never going to be outdated to be in tune with my children. And that's really where we're at here with this. So it's such a robust conversation. It's just really difficult to pick apart little pieces. I guess that's what I have to say. Sorry.
No, Kristen, if I may, I really appreciate that. And that is why within the proposal, the conversation of shifting to making sure, as I believe Columbia does, and learning from their lead, of putting in a letter grade in Power School every 2 weeks to help start that conversation and help heal that gap, as well as then working with folks to get to a better spot on what are we actually communicating with those letter grades, and are we doing a better job of aligning our instruction and our assessment to support the learning of all kids. So I really appreciate that. You're right, we can do both, and how do we do that is the question moving forward.
Any other questions? So I want to move to public comment, and we'll still have time afterwards to have discussion if we needed to, but I wanted the public to kind of hear the presentation also from Mr. Yarborough also.
Thank you for your time, I appreciate it.
Thank you.
We may have some further questions after public comment.
Chairman, I just want to seek clarification. I did just have someone come up and ask if they could be added to the list. I think our rules of engagement is you have to sign in at the beginning of the meeting, but they did show up late.
It's not my fault they showed up late.
So I said I would seek clarification.
Is there anyone in the audience that would like to sign this? Because if I give it to one person, I want to make sure everybody has that opportunity. And this is going outside of, you're on here. Yeah. And I just want to make sure that we're fair.
Great, and we're going outside our.
I will
rules of
go
order.
outside this meeting. Okay, I'm gonna put you at the bottom. Okay, the first one for public comment is Samantha Callis. Okay, you have 3 minutes. Oh, you got it up over here. Great, 3 minutes. We're gonna stick to the 3 minutes.
Okay, I'll talk fast.
All right.
Okay, good evening. As you consider actions on standard-based grading, I'd like to tell you about the impact it's had on my own children. My daughter is a high-achieving music and theater student. She will be a junior this year at Nampa High School. She was tested for and entered into the Gifted and Talented program in 4th grade for the arts. She is a hardworking, intelligent student on an advanced path in math and language arts. My son is a smart, hardworking, funny student. He'll be in 8th grade at Lone Star. He thrives in challenging environments, loves sports, both watching and playing, and comes alive with projects and works to build the best rendition of whatever it is he's studying. Both have been negatively impacted. Now, I'm a teacher and I'm a parent, so I understand standards from both perspectives. And I'm really shaky and I talk in front of people all the time. Okay. I want to be clear though. I think standards of learning are an important piece to student growth. I believe they have a place in helping drive instruction for teachers. I also know that it helps teachers discern which student is grasping the content or not. However, I think the unintended impact is that students like my children who want to achieve to the highest ability that they can have become apathetic in their learning. Some of this might have to do with the misunderstandings surrounding SPG, but in the case of my kids, and likely others, the apathy is a result of getting the same grade as a peer on a project, assignment, or task when they clearly put more effort, time, and energy into it. In school, especially high school, students are being prepared for the real world. Whether it's college, the workforce, or trade, they will enter this world of adulthood after graduation. In the real world, we have standards, yes, but we also reward those who demonstrate ability and effort to go above and beyond the expectation. These rewards can be in the form of pay raises, bonuses, promotions, scholarships, new assignments, etc. SVG is unintentionally creating a mindset of mediocrity in students, where if they just achieve the 3, then they're good to go. No need to go above and beyond because the extra stuff they would have done to try to achieve a higher point value in the traditional method doesn't matter in the standards-based method. I know standards are important. It's important for vertical alignment, but we have to do better than just SVG. Students like my kids are now the students that you are leaving behind. The thinkers, the doers, the ingenuity, the planners, the performers, the ones who want to go above and beyond. They are the ones that are now falling into this trap of academic apathy. I've watched my kids crumble over their grades with SVG because they gave 110% and received the 90% grade, simply because the extra things they put into didn't matter. Standards-based grading has a purpose, but before too many students start getting comfortable with mediocrity and don't crave the exemplary, we have to change it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms.
Thank
Callis.
you.
Next one on the list is Mr. Steve Mond.
Got
I get
We'll
that
give
now.
it to her first.
All right, so I'm Steve Mon. I've taught at the NEPA School District for the past 6 years, and I've been teaching for 16, 17 years now. What I have here, I apologize, this isn't polished, it's not prepared, but this is an example of a standard, and we're broken down with proficiency scale. So as a board, you guys have standards. So the Idaho School Board Association has standards that here's what a highly functioning school board would look like. I listen to the end of the meeting and you guys do an assessment of how well did we do as a board, or how well are we doing? And generally I hear, well, we're doing satisfactory, needs improvement. Giving kind of an arbitrary assessment doesn't really tell you where you're at and how you're doing. But having clear standards with clear objectives and an understanding of where we're at, with the goal being proficient, and then breaking down those steps gives you a clear understanding of where you're at as a board. You take a look at that, you know, if there's spelling errors or anything like that, again, I put that together very quickly today. For my students, and what would that look like as well, this is what this looks like on that. My students in my classroom should be able to look at my essential standards, should be able to look at my proficiency scales and identify for themselves where they're at. One of the challenges with anything right now is giving timely feedback. And when I've got 36 students in a classroom, it's really difficult to get back to a student quickly and to go through and grade everything and get that back. In the past, what I did is I gave a test that was 100 points, and I gave worksheets that were 10 points, and students could, if they did well in that 100-point test, they could turn in a whole bunch of those 10-point worksheets and it would balance it out. But was I really truly grading students on, or, you know, assessing students on where they were truly at? And the answer is no. Standards-based grading has really helped me as a teacher to find that. What do my students need to learn? What do they need to be able to know? And what do they need to be able to do? And then where are they at? If they're not where they're supposed to be, how can I get them to? Have I done that perfectly as a teacher? No. This last couple of years it's been tough as a teacher for a number of reasons. Lastly, as a company commander, as an infantry company commander, I was responsible for training 168 soldiers for combat. The military has collective training tasks. I go in and I see I get my mission essential task list, and then there's a whole bunch of criteria that I'm either trained, proficient, or untrained. And that tells me whether I'm doing my job, what my soldiers need to do, and exactly where we need to do. The real world uses standards-based grading. We don't call it that. But it's not something that's foreign to us. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Mon.
Thank you.
I've said this before, I'll say it again. Thank you for your service. Next on the list is Amy Barbieri.
Hi, guys. I hate speaking, so I'll try and do my best here. I have been a parent of 2 NSD students since 2014. One is now in middle school and one in high school. I have always been very involved in the classrooms and very supportive of the teachers and the schools. Since the change to standards-based grading, I have never felt more disconnected. There is little to no communication between the teachers and parents, and I still have yet to receive grades or a report card from my daughter's 6th grade year. Standards-based grading, along with the Otis platform, is not user-friendly. It doesn't work for the students, it doesn't work for the parents, and I'm hearing it's not working for the teachers. What happened to accountability and mailing out or sending home report cards along with a possible parent-teacher conference? I mean, let's not reinvent the wheel here. Let's stick to what has worked for decades. I have spoke to not only my own children, but my children's friends throughout the whole school year. There is a consistent feeling they are extremely frustrated and confused by standards-based grading. When making your decision, please take into consideration the majority of the community's thoughts and feelings surrounding standards-based grading. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Barbieri. By the way, if you end up with extra time, it doesn't go to the next person. I just want to make that very clear. Okay, next on the list is Kim Ross.
Hi, Kim Ross. All right. As a trustee, since May of 2017, I probably know standards-based grading inside and out more than anything. I've been to every PD, every board meeting that since this issue has started. June of 2018 is when we as trustees were presented with the policy that you have now. It hasn't been changed. It was wording. We didn't know what the definition was, what it looked like, what we all have fielded as now, what we know what it is now. We didn't know that. It was the words on the paper, and we agreed and we passed those words on the paper. Which word? I guess how many was it was don't grade on behavior, have high levels of expectations of learning, right? All those things that we're talking about now. Stephen Moore just talked about those essential standards and curriculum. That was all defined and done in the district just the years prior to when we put in our curriculum. So they started with defining the essential standards. Then they said, okay, let's get new curriculum on that. Then they said, let's teach to that and do our standards on that. Then our next one was, let's start to do our assessments based on that. We actually never got to the assessment part, still working on curriculum and still redefining standards-based grading. What I want you to know is from 2018 to now has been 4 years of this pilot program. September of 2018 is when I received my first complaint from a teacher and a parent. It didn't stop there. In 2018, a survey went out to the staff members that were piloting this. 22 of those folks responded, and I have that for you. I didn't see it in your packet. 90% agreed that communication with parents and students was not more understandable or clear for their course. 95% would not like the school board to approve the use of standards-based gradebook for the 2019-2020 year. The 2019-2020 year is when they started unified classroom gradebook. So 2018, they piloted, didn't work with Power School. None of the teachers that piloted liked it, didn't work effectively with their gradebook. They still went forward and did the unified classroom the next year, 2019. That didn't work. 2020, then went to Otis. It is March of 20 when COVID hit. That is not why standards-based grading has failed. It has not done well consistently throughout that. And we've continued to get updates by the district in a similar manner that you have now that says, it's not working well, it's not going great, it's not being implemented properly, and it keeps changing. And there are so many things where it changes. First, there was a pamphlet that said, okay, if you get a score of a 2 in any standard, you get a B. We still don't know what a 4 is. You ask a teacher right now, no one can give you a definition of a 4. So it's been modified and changed every year. It's changed. Please stop modifying. Please stop changing.
West Ada canceled it in 2018 after one semester. We can do it now after 4 years of trying.
All right, thank you. Ms.
Thank
Ross.
you.
Thank you.
Kristen Young, you are next on the list.
I also do not like this. So I'm gonna go a different route because I actually had some student letters I was gonna read, but after listening to the PowerPoint presentation, I just kind of wanted to address a couple of things that I heard and things that I know from doing my own research and talking to many students and many parents and teachers. One, I just want to address the survey. About 50 people that I know that have middle schoolers and high schoolers did not receive the survey. Why? Two, talking to students, students are being set up for failure. They are not, the standards-based grading is failing them. They don't know where they're at. If you don't know where you're at, how can you improve if you don't know where you're at? Universities, the kids going into universities, the universities do not use this. The kids, many kids that I have talked to have are leaving the Nampa School District because of this. I talked to 5 last week that are moving out of the Nampa School District. Some are going to Ada, some are going to other districts around the area because of the standards-based grading issue in the Nampa School District. So I just kind of wanted to put that out there. Amy kind of already shared with you some other things that I was going to share, but I just wanted to kind of give you guys that information because boots on the ground is the best research you could get. Talking to students is the best thing you can do to hear how they feel, what it's doing to them and how it is affecting them, and they're failing. So we just keep pushing kids along. One of the things that was said in one of the last meetings was that kids can turn their work in at the end of the semester. But in the real world, when you're given a utility bill that has a due date on it, do you have till December to pay it if you're given it in August? No. What's going to happen? You're going to get your utility turned off. So in the real world, this doesn't work. And so what we're teaching our kids is that they can have a due date and not meet the due date. And if we're trying to set up our kids for success for the real world, then that isn't going to work. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Young.
Thank you.
Next on the list is JC Johnson.
Hi. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. I worked with the district leadership back in 2013 when I was the PTA president at Roosevelt Elementary to organize a parent information night about standards-based grading. I attended the informational night at Lone Star in 2019 when they discussed the benefits of standards-based grading and have appreciated the grading system for the past 3 years. Standards-based grading gives not just teachers, but also parents a very clear picture of what their child knows and is still struggling with. Knowing you can study harder, complete unfinished work, and retake a test gives students power over their learning and promotes a growth mindset in a way an A, B, C, or D does not. I liked being able to look at my son's grades and talk with him about the standards he was still working on. State tests are based on state standards. Standards are what teachers teach. So it makes sense to test students on the standards and provide grades based on those same standards. If you're unfamiliar with what those standards are, I hope you'll look them up and read them on the Idaho Department of Education website. Improving education can sometimes be a bumpy road, but it doesn't mean change shouldn't happen for the benefit of kids. After all, it wasn't that long ago that schools spanked kids, put children with learning disabilities in the corner, and publicly shamed them. When kids struggled with reading, they get labeled and ridiculed, put in a group with other low readers, and never progress. Thank goodness education has changed over the years. Some things are better left in the past. Standards-based grading is another necessary change that will bring about positive achievement outcomes, if only we give it a chance and some time. Mr. Yarbrough mentioned that what we teach, how we teach, and the way our kids learn now is different than it used to be. Now they need to be taught to filter through that too much information, whereas when we were all kids, we were still needing to find that information.
Things change, and though we might sometimes wish we could go back to simpler times, we can't. And we must adjust to prepare our kids to live in this world, now and in the future. When we're evaluated at work on our performance as adults, we're evaluated on whether or not we are successfully doing the tasks required for the job. If we are, we pass and we keep our jobs. A 3. If we excel, we may receive a raise or earn a promotion. A 4. If we're not, we'll likely be given a chance to improve on our work to be reevaluated. A 2. If we do not improve, we will lose our jobs. A 1. If we don't show up, definitely losing our jobs. Standards-based grading is very similar and helps to prepare our students for the workplace as adults. I believe that with some more effort and to help parents and students understand standards-based grades, and perhaps with more communication to parents about when standards should be met and how students are being supported to meet them, we'll see an improved attitude from both kids and adults towards standards-based grading. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Josie. Next is Suzanne Schumacher, or Shoemaker, one of the two. Schumacher.
Hi, thanks for letting me speak. I am new to the district as of 1 year ago, about exactly today. So I have he's currently a senior in high school. He came in as a junior. And I want to say that perhaps the idea of standards-based grading is a wonderful idea, but it has not the experience my family had. It was confusing. The teachers were frustrated with it, and my son was unduly stressed out trying to understand what was required of him. As a background, my son came from a college prep charter school with a 4.2 GPA. He has had no problem in the past meeting and exceeding what was required of him in school. My son found that the original assessments given out were harder and therefore scored lower. This was to show mastery later, meaning that the standard was graded before it was taught. This may not be what was intended, I'm sure it wasn't, but this is what happens because people are trying to make this work. Another problem, one of my son's teachers was told that he was giving out too many 3s and 4s. If you look at what standards-based grading is supposed to be, I have a list here, you're supposed to be given the grade that you earned. So whether or not everybody else in your class gets a 3 or 4, it shouldn't matter. You should get one if you are earned a 3 or a 4. That was just, he literally came home so upset when his teacher said, I can't give out that many 3s and 4s. When every student in the class, it was an AP class, by the way, of college-bound kids, so they were all doing their best. So the other thing, then when I met with the teacher, or whoever it was, I'm sorry, I don't remember their name, who was supposed to tell me about standards-based grading, they informed me that behavior is not assessed in standards-based grading, it's just mastery. So if a student is not in class, is tardy, or train and work late, these behaviors will affect mastery, but it doesn't count towards their grade. They absolutely should be graded and assessed on whether or not they're tardy, whether or not their assignments are turned in on time. Our public schools should be helping students learn to be productive members of society via proper behavior, as well as science, history, and mathematics. You should be on time for your job. You should get your work done on time. Let's see. I really think that I was hearing you earlier about the fact that you're having trouble hiring teachers, and that's a problem right now. I think that perhaps efforts and resources should be put in hiring really good teachers to teach students, not frustrating teachers with a, to me, it seems like a smoke and mirrors grading system.
Schumacher, sorry. And then the last one on the list is Ms. Christensen, Ann Christensen. And I didn't know whether you were for or against. I'm going to leave it with the clerk. You can just fill that in.
Okay.
I don't want to make any assumptions.
All right, thanks for having me on. I'm sorry I was late. I am a parent. I'm a Napa School District employee. So I'm involved as a teacher, but I see a lot of frustration from teachers with how much more tasks they have when they have to take standards-based grading, change it to an A, so it just adds more work to their pile. The theory for standards-based grading is good in theory. And my biggest concern about it as a community member, and that's why I became an employee of the school district. I want to make my community better. I want to contribute to children. This is my biggest concern, is that I have a hard time understanding and knowing, or my children knowing what their grade is. I want to be a partner in their education. And I feel like I'm invested in that. And I just wonder how many other parents can't understand it either. You know, I've talked to multiple people that are not able to feel like they know what's going on with their children's grade. They want to support their child and saying, hey, you need to get this done now. And they're not able to help them. And so it becomes this thing where the kids and the teachers might know what's going on, but the parents aren't able to be a partner in their education. And that to me is really important for not only me, who I feel like I have a bachelor's degree. I'm educated. I'm having a hard time helping, being supportive of my children that are in the system. But then maybe someone doesn't have the time or tries to understand, also can't, but doesn't have this time to come in and fight for their children. So that's my biggest concern. I feel like we need to come together as a community, as parents, as educators, and be able to help our children succeed. Otis, we have a contract with that for 1 more year. The one thing I do like about Otis is the way that you have due dates, and so a student can go in there and they can see what's due next, just like in college. And I think that's the greatest aspect of Otis, and you can see the different standards that they're meeting. But the problem with Otis is, like, if you are with standard-based grading, is like if they get lower, if they get 3s all semester, then they get a couple 2s at the end, and that affects their grade. And so they may have had mastery of skills throughout the semester, but then something they didn't understand or didn't do as well, it reflects badly in the grade. I don't see colleges using the standards-based grading, so I don't understand how we're preparing them for college by using it in the future. That's the my main point. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. I don't make it a habit to pull my phone out here while I'm in the meeting, but I do want to bring up, there was a letter that was sent to us by a student, and I think hearing from students is sometimes better than hearing from all of you. As much as I love you guys, hearing from the students is always the best. And she pointed out a couple of 2 things, and this is Haley. I can't remember her name, and I'm going to lose my place if I scroll down to it. But you have, Clerk Lamont, you have this letter in your email. I'll make sure you have it if not, but it is on public. Okay, she points out 2 things here, and I think this is these are good points. And I'm stalling because I'm trying to find my place here. She says, during my college search this year, I had 3 different schools that were worried of my success in their program after coming from a background of standards-based grading, even after graduating with a 4.0 and being a valedictorian. I think there's some legitimacy there. I mean, that was a real concern. And I'm not saying that didn't happen. She's saying that it did happen. I don't know what schools they are. She didn't identify them, but I think that is a real concern. And the other one is, and I found this in my kids too, it was a little frustrating. She says, I also found standards-based grading to be confusing and challenging to understand what my final grade of a class for the semester year would be, since it would be transferred back to a letter grade in Power School, and I was not able to see that letter grade until after the term ended, which by then was too late to improve my grade. So, and I think that's a concern also, that's a legitimate concern. And again, this is coming from a student. This is coming from a student who experienced the back end of standards-based grading rather than the front end of the implementation. So that being said, and again, we'll make sure that this gets into Haley Shellhas, I think that's what it is, a letter that she had sent attached to it. I appreciate the comment. I think they were all very valid, and I appreciate the decorum also that was present during the comments too. Dr. Russell, is there anything that you would like to, I mean, you handed out some survey. Let me address that question, because that question did come up, and I had sent Dr. Russell an email also, full disclosure here, asking why I didn't get the survey. I have 2 kids at Columbia and I have one kid at East Valley. And I didn't get the survey to take for standard-based gradient. And I checked my junk mail and spam and everything else, and he told me it's probably where it's at. And so I did raise that concern, and I wondered if all of the parents who had kids in secondary schools were getting the survey and had the opportunity to respond. And it sounds like from public testimony that there may have been some others that possibly didn't get that survey. Could you address that question and then anything else that you wanted to add?
Through Chair Kirkman, trustees. So the survey was used by the emails that's in Power School, and it was used through Qualtrics, which is the survey software that we use. And to my understanding, it was sent out to those emails. And so I think it would be helpful to find out, for example, why you didn't receive that. You have to double check that email in Power School if it is accurate. And I would need to go to our IT and try to find out why did that email not get in or not get a kickback. I think in your packet, and when we get a chance to kind of go through it, I'll share that number that it went to. There are certain ones that were kicked back or that were not valid email addresses, so does send that back into the system. But to our end, what we do is we pull out of Power School, because that's where our student information services is. I pull those email addresses. We run a query based on high school and middle school, and then it goes out to those.
Okay.
So apologize to folks that did not receive.
I've gotten all the other ones, especially the ones for the levy, so I thought it was.
I got them all
Okay,
too,
hold on,
except
hold
for
on,
that
hold
one.
on. Public comment is over. I asked the question to Dr. Russell and he responded, so we can talk about that later if we need to. But I want to give you an opportunity also, maybe some of the survey results, if that's where you'd like to go next on that.
Sure. So Chairman Kirkman, trustees, just wanted to share with you the survey results. I'm going to ask Zane here if he would bring that up, and did ask Clerk Lamont to kind of post that so folks can see it and read some of the comments in there, and I'll just go over that. We did send those to our secondary parents that I mentioned, our high school and our middle school folks.
Zane, I don't think it's in there.
Zane is the one I sent you.
It actually is on the bottom, but it's.
Oh, did it get in there?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So if you pull that up, I'll walk you through that and just share the information that we received back. Next slide. Really fast there, Zane.
Now, just clarification before we get started, did the board get these survey results before tonight? I don't,
The
this
board did
person
not
I've seen
receive
them.
these
Okay,
before tonight.
I didn't know if I missed them or not, I just want to make sure.
And
No,
Chairman
we-
Kirkman, clarification, he sent it to me during the meeting.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah, and he handed us all copies too. so, Okay.
Chair Kirkman, trustees, you did not receive this book for tonight. We sent this out on a Friday and ended on a Tuesday. Got the results on a Thursday. Tried to clean the results so that they're more easily readable, and had Mr. Stoffer do that. Usually Mr. Jers is the one that runs that. So hopefully in the future, as we get more accustomed to Qualtrics, if we choose to use Qualtrics, if we can't get to everyone's emails, then we probably need a different survey system. But that is why you received them tonight. I wanted to make sure at least we had them to go over and discuss with you. So what you'll see when it's really small there, shoot, you're not gonna be able to see that.
If you hit Control Plus, it might bring it up a little bigger.
Yeah, what I'll explain essentially is there at the high school, which is to your left, it was sent to 4,957 emails. 555 responded. So about 11% or so responded to that. Middle school, it was sent to about 3,700 emails, and about 382 responded to that. So next slide, Zane, just so we can go through. And then it was just broken down by school, kind of what school you attend, and you can see there. Napa High, 186 folks responding, so I'm going to actually read these so people in the audience can see them. Skyview had 223 respond. Columbia had 134. Union High had 9. Nova had 5, so a total of 507. The next slide, there's the question, and the purpose of the survey was to gain information about, we understand that there is concerns around standard-based grading and try to find out what are those. And so this first one asks, what is your level, to try to understand level of understanding. And 75% of folks said they had a moderate to at least exceptional understanding of standards-based grading at the high school level. So 400 of the 528 folks responded to that. So that indicates that there's generally good understanding out there based on folks that reported it. The next one asks a question on what is your level of frustration with standards-based grading? And you'll see there's a great deal of frustration. I'm extremely frustrated. That was 224 respondents responded to that. 131 responded to somewhat frustrated. And then 85 to neither, 37 somewhat satisfied, and 51 extremely satisfied. So that's about 67% of folks that responded that said they were either extremely frustrated or somewhat frustrated at the high school level. Next question there breaks it down to kind of, if you're frustrated, to please identify the areas where you're frustrated and what those kind of are. And so you could choose multiple ones in this one, which is why there's a little bit more respondents. But the primary one was around definition of grades. You know, what is a grade? You had 220 folks respond to that. That's about 30%. Updating the scores or just not having that consistent enough. That was about 29% for 211. And then the lack of communication from teachers was the other major one. That was 167 respondents, and that was about 23% there as well. So those were the primary ones. Just what is a grade? It's just not updated, or we're not able to tell what that is. That's similar to what we heard in some of the testimony. And then the lack of communication from teachers was another major concern there. And then there's deadlines. And then other was comment. And so the comments are posted there. I'm not going to read every comment, but I'll summarize them and then can read through those later. Question 4. So mentioned the comments. I think that's the next one, Zane. What are the other comments there? And you can't see them up there. Basically, the comments were in a variety of areas. If you were to summarize them, one is that we just really dislike it. We hate standards-based grading. That was clearly in there. You'll see that if you read through that. Another one that we heard is similar to tonight is it hurts students, particularly high-performing students. That was something that we heard in those comments as well. Colleges don't use it, so why should we use it if colleges don't use it? That was in there. GPAs on our traditional system were better. It was easier to get a GPA or understand that. That was a comment that's in there. Lack of consistency or understanding on how a student is doing and just not having consistency across from classroom to classroom, teacher to teacher. That was in the comments as well. And there's, I think, about 4 pages in the high school area there that you can go through and read. Actually 4.5. And then the last page of the high school survey, kind of asking what order would you like to see topics addressed if you would like to see the district address them, and you can choose a couple of different options. The bottom portion of that on your, kind of where Zane's putting his cursor right down there. Yeah, I'm sorry people can't read it, but the number one thing was, why did we move to standards-based grading? I mean, that's one thing that if they wanted to address is to figure out why was that? What was the point of that? The second one was how are grades calculated? The third one was how does standards-based grading work with scholarships in colleges and universities? And then how to find grades in Otis would be the last one. It just kind of shares, summarizes some of the areas in that one. So middle school, would just like to share some time with that. And middle school is very similar to high school. Again, you can see the number of respondents here over the 5 days that it was open. We'll skip that one, Zane. I mentioned 3,700 folks, about 3,795 responded to that. Here, just shares, East Valley had about 82 respondents. West had 45. South had 136. Union had 2. Nova had 7. Lone Star had 95. New Horizons had 11. And then the Ridge had 8 respondents there. So there's 356 in that one. What is your level of understanding of standards-based grading? Again, the vast majority of folks, 72% of them said they had a moderate to exceptional understanding of standards-based grading there. So that, again, it appears that most folks have a good understanding of it. The next question there, Zane, you're ahead of me, good job. There would be you know, what is your level of frustration for standards-based grading? And again, you'll see the majority of folks there were extremely frustrated or somewhat frustrated. That was about 61%, not as high as high school. Still, there's some folks who are very frustrated with that. 91% were neither. Were neutral, 27 were satisfied, and 23 were extremely satisfied. Next page there. Again, kind of, if you were dissatisfied with it, please identify some areas that, you know, maybe you're frustrated. And very similar to high school's definition of a grade. What is a grade? 33% kind of mentioned that. Updating grades so that those can be consistent. About 22% responded that was their concern. And then a lack of communication from teachers. There's about 23% of that. And then tailed off was deadlines. And those comments there as well. If you look at the comments, going through those, real similar themes. Lack of consistency was one of the comments in there. It's standards-based grading is hard to understand or understand where my kids' learning is. That was another one. It hurts high achieving students. That was another theme that was in there. And just we like the old system better. I think that was a pretty common theme to find out in there that A, B, C, D, F worked and it was better in the old system. So there's, I think, 3 pages of comments there. And then the last one was real similar again. If there was anything to be addressed, you know, what would you like to see? And if you go to the bottom part, where Zane's cursor kind of is, the number one is very similar. Why did we do the standards-based grading? Like to figure that out. Number 2 is how grades are calculated. And number 3 is how to find grades in Otis. And then 4, which makes sense for middle school, was, you know, how does it affect scholarships or college universities? That was kind of the last part. So that just summarizes information from the survey. And I want to make sure that the board and the folks out there that took the survey, thank you for doing that. I'm sure with you what that is.
Thank you. I was trying to find another email because I know I had one email from another student who was actually for standards-based grading. So I wanted to make sure that I want to make sure that was in, but that's also in the record too. We can get that in.
Chair Kirkman, I believe there is one student here that we want to speak to it. Mr. Wilson here.
Did she not sign? Did I miss her on the public? Even when I said, is there anyone else here that wants to get on the sign-in sheet? And I held it up and said, okay, this is it. You know.
Chairman, to answer your question, Superintendent, she did come to support it anyway. Any way that we can support you as a board, she's going to do that.
Would you like to speak?
Sure, yeah. Super Chairman,
I know, Chris, you're gonna chew me out.
I think you said this is the last.
That is,
meeting
I
that rules of
apologize.
order
We are
not gonna
holding
be
fast to that. I did give everybody an opportunity
It's
to sign
okay.
up on that.
I'm just saying, last meeting.
Submit an email. We'll get it on the record. It'll be in the record if there's something that you would like to say, okay? And that goes for anyone else. All right, is there anything else that you would like to?
Chair Kirkman, trustees, no, I
Okay.
believe we've talked about this several times. I think we understand where community is, where the district is. Have the board to discuss.
Okay.
That you take action, take action.
I do, you know, I was reading through this teacher handbook, again. A lot of comments, a lot of questions. I kind of landed on this quote from Robert Marzano on page 5, and it has the table of any and one beginning to approaching proficiency and so on and so on. And then the quote by Robert Marzano, who I believe is the author of standards-based grading, or is he? I mean, I'm not quite sure where he fits in. I know he's a researcher and in the education field, highly respected. And his quote is, "Why would anyone want to change current grading practices? The answer is quite simple. Grades are so imprecise that they are almost meaningless." And then I look at this chart that's right above it, and then my question is, how does this chart that seems so subjective demonstrate any precision in grading? So it just kind of went directly in contrast, in my view anyways, to what he had said in that quote. That was just one thing that really popped out in my head. So I don't want to beleaguer the point, beat a dead horse. Is there anything,
I just want
Trustee Taylor?
Yeah, I do. I would
What
just
would
like
you like
to
to say?
add, well, it's just adding a child story who's not an overachiever, not a high achiever. So she's now a high school student. Her name is Brianna Colindres. She works for me. Her brother worked for me. Brianna, she's a really bright girl that really struggles in school, and she struggles with standards-based grading like you can't believe. And one of the comments that she made to me, because I've taken to the practice every time I run into a child to say, hey, how do you, I even asked my banker, but hey, how do you feel about standards-based grading? And something that she said to me, I think will stick with me for the rest of my life, and here's why. In all of the kids that have ever worked for me, she's one of just the brightest. She grasps concepts quickly. She can outwork most adults. It's crazy. And she said, I really hate it because no matter how hard I try, I just can't seem to get this standard. And I put in all this work and I put in all this work and all this work, and it doesn't seem to matter. And I've done X amount of work, but this person got the standard and they excelled. And for me, and I'll die believing this, hard work matters. And hard work makes a huge difference in life. And so I've struggled with that time and time again, because she's not your highest achiever, she's not your lowest achiever. But if we're sending the message that no matter how hard you work, it stays the same, that's just not how life works. As a matter of fact, when people ask me what success is, I often say it shows up looking a lot like work boots. And I'll go to my grave believing that as well. So I just want her story to be on the record as well, because she's not your highest achieving student, she's not your lowest, but she's affected in this way. And I think that those are some of the unintended consequences as well. I just wanted her story to be on the record. Okay.
Chair
Yeah,
Kirkman.
You're after trustee Valier, okay?
I just wanted to say, one thing that I failed to do is to try to reach out to Hispanic families, because there's a lot of them in our district. And I know there's a lot of them that don't speak the language very well. You guys may have noticed I'm Hispanic.
Thanks for the update.
Now I'm even more concerned about their lack of understanding. If people hear, as they have testified in front of us or share their experiences, some teachers, some degrees, and if they have a hard time, their kids have a hard time, I wonder how they feel. Because with the old grading system, you could tell. I remember my dad giving me a spanking because he could tell. He didn't know what I did wrong. But he could tell, oh, you're screwing up. You know, and I'm not saying that. I just feel like there's a disconnect with the current system, and there's people that are not getting the information they need, and there's people that will have a hard time anyways, but now have a harder time, and there's nothing they can do or say, and a lot of Hispanics are misrepresented anyways, and they don't want to speak up. They just go with the flow because they don't want to create, waves. So I feel like there's something that I need to, that I got to put that in my mind as I try to figure this out. Another piece of the pie.
Trustee Simpson?
I just in hearing and seeing all the information on this, hopefully what we're hearing is that it's not a grading problem that we have. It's a communication problem. And it's a communication problem of what does the grade mean? What is my grade currently right now or at any given moment throughout time, or whether it's parents or students looking at that. So it doesn't matter what system you're talking about. To me, the issue is communication. And, you know, people say the traditional system or whatever you want to call it, the system, the grading system that the rest of us grew up on, had the same problems in communication, but we didn't think there was a problem because we could look at any given time, or we could call a teacher, right? Or you could pull up and you could know, like, my student's grade is this, or my grade is this in this class. But knowing what that means was where the problem lied. It's also a change. If we truly want the rigor that people talk about in education, standards-based grading is more rigorous. And it's more rigorous because we want to look at who's actually meeting the standard, who actually understands it, and not who had it in their short-term memory when they took the chapter 7 test. But yet on the final exam, they no longer remember anything about this topic. That to me is not understanding. That's not learning if you can't retain that information. So because of that, I just want to be clear, my vote will be in support of standards-based grading, but not as it is in the current NAMPA system. There needs to be a lot of work, a lot of work on communication, on communicating the why, because it is a best practice. It is research-based. And it does truly help students. But all of the things that I keep hearing are, again, communication problems. When we're getting out what the student's grade is, what they know, what they don't know. Well, that's a communication problem, not a grading system problem. So there needs to be work on that. Because I've seen it, I've used it, and it does help students if used correctly and if implemented correctly. Students do amazing things. It takes the timeline out. So many things I've heard, like there's a due date. You know, hopefully there's no due date for learning, right? We're going to keep learning. I hope all of us, I know we're continuing to learn from one another, but I hope we're teaching kids that there's not, if you don't know it by this date, then you're never going to know it. Like, if you want to learn something, you can learn it, right? You can figure it out, you can do it, but it may take longer for you to learn something than it takes someone else. Okay. But I just think that one, it takes out that timeline piece, right? And if kids want to utilize the system and think they're outsmarting it because they're waiting for things to get, you know, I'm going to wait till the end of the semester to turn everything in. Well, I think what they find is that, oh, I shouldn't have done that. And I picked the wrong way to learn that lesson by waiting till the end to turn things in. I can't stress enough that it also gets at making sure our educators are focusing on the standards that our district and our state has set aside as these are the priority. This is what we want you to learn. And it also puts teachers in the hot seat to say, no, you've got these students who still don't know it. What are you going to do to meet their needs? How are you going to get them there? And how are you going to push these other ones who met the standard? How are you going to push them to a 4? Because there is a need to get a 4, but it's not based on effort or how much time you put in. It's based on your level of understanding. So I just wanted to, I've been listening and hearing, but I just wanted to put my 2 cents in about what I hear. I know we have a problem. It's not perfect. And it's not because over and over again, I keep hearing our communication is what's flawed. And that's what needs to be worked on. And I heard some of those things from Mr. Yarbrough.
Thank you, Trustee Simpson.
Chair Kirkman,
Yes, trustee Taylor.
can I make a comment
Sure.
in regards to what trustee Ray said?
Absolutely.
And I just want you to correct me if I'm incorrect, but so often when you speak, it reminds me of things that I forget to say. And so one of the things that I just enjoy really being on the board because your perspectives are so good. But back to Brianna Holders, right? One of the big things is her mom fight all the time because her mom wants to know the grade, her mom and dad want to know the grade. And one of the things I think that you really do speak to, but sometimes you don't put into words, is Hispanic culture is very traditional. And I really think that that's what you were trying to say. And so your dad wanted you to get with grades or you would be punished. And I think a lot of that still happens today. So when that communication doesn't happen at home of what's that grade, she's been grounded before just because grade's not turned in and there is that lack of understanding of what's really going on and they just want to see that grade. So I appreciate that you articulate that. So you really are speaking, for that there. So I wanted to point out that when you speak about that, it's true. It does disproportionately affect people who live in tradition. So thank you.
It just doesn't happen in Hispanic households either.
No, I know, but to what you were
Yeah.
speaking to though about it and your dad and everything else.
Yeah, good discussion. I drew, as I was listening to public comment and someone had mentioned the parents, and I drew this, a little picture, a doodle on my paper here of a three-legged stool, and it really does come down to the communication piece like Trustee Simpson was talking about. And I think the frustration the biggest frustration is on the parent side. I mean, the students get it, they're frustrated, but honestly, they're just glad that they're moving on to the next class. I mean, honestly, but the parents, when they're looking at the grades, where is your grade? What is your grade? How are you doing? So I think, that communication piece is absolutely critical, and it does involve, it is a three-legged stool, the parents, the students, and the teachers. I do want to give a shout out to Mr. Yarbrough and the staff for bringing the proposal for board consideration. I think there was obviously some thought behind that, and I mean, I don't know what the board is going to do, but I do appreciate the proposals there that were brought forward by Mr. Yarbrough and the staff that worked on that. So, is there any other discussion on this topic? Trustee Pearson?
I just wanted to say that, as Kim Ross brought up, she was a trustee for 4 years. So this has been 4 years of disconnection, frustration, confusion, academic apathy, as the one woman said. Decreased motivation. To me, it's just slamming the door in the face of learning, because we are all here. We have these buildings, multi-million-dollar budgets for the kids. That's why we are here. And I'm seeing nothing but frustration, lack of motivation. I mean, the world's already chaotic enough. The kids are up against so many things these days. This is one that I feel that we need to end, because it's too frustrating for these kids, the parents. There's such a disconnect between the parents, the students, and the teachers. And I don't understand why, as someone said, are we reinventing the wheel? It works well. I'm doing just fine. I went through the ABCDF. So all my adult kids went through it. I do not know why people are not listening to the frustration of the students and the parents. That's why we are sitting up here. That's why we were voted and put in this position, to be the voice of the parents and the students, period.
Okay.
So, I have a comment.
Okay, Trustee.
Oh,
Downing?
I don't know if it's a comment question. I'm just trying to figure out the difficulties of making a change. And I guess I want to ask Superintendent Russell about the possibility, if this board decides to make a change, what does it look like? Because I know nothing is impossible. But I know there's going to be hardships if something like that happens. What do you see it looking like?
Chair Cooper, Trustee Bai, thank you for the question, Trustee Bai. You're absolutely right. Every decision does have some ramifications, and you're also right. Nothing is impossible. I ideally, this would be nice, 5 or 6 months until the school year starts, so that we could work with teachers and administrators and kind of get a plan. We don't have a lot of time. We got 2.5 weeks, 3 weeks. Anticipating a possible switch, I did contact our team to see if Power School Teacher Pro still worked and if we can get up and running and create some of that. It looks like we can. So what I believe would be is whatever occurred, we would communicate with administrators and with teachers that no longer use Otis. We would use Power Teacher Pro as your gradebook. And teachers would then work with administrators at their building to determine grading practices. And many of the teachers would probably fall back to what they have. I think based on what I heard from the board is possibly administration would like to, the board might want administration to start looking for that we have some common practices around grading. And that's something that we could work on. And I can't give you a crystal ball of what that might look like. I think I'd have to turn to our administrators out in the field and talk with them, talk with our teachers, and try to figure out what that might look like. But in the near future of opening school in 3 weeks, that's what I can predict. For some teachers and some departments, it'll be hard. They put a lot of work into it. They got a lot of things around proficiency scales. They got a lot of work around how they give feedback to students. For other departments, it won't be hard at all. They'll switch pretty quickly and easily, and we'll probably be glad to do that. So I think it's a little bit of both.
Trustee Taylor?
Superintendent Russell. So just some clarification here. So when I'm looking at the policy and I'm looking at the policy changes as those options, doing away with this as a grading system, I want clarification that we're not going to walk away from the standards-based teaching. So I guess a couple of things too, and then also in elementary. So we've been doing this in elementary for such a long period of time. Can you tell me, haven't we been doing this in elementary for like 10, 12?
Chair Kirkman, Trustee Taylor, we've been doing this for 8 years in elementary.
Right. So what is it that, what I don't want anything to do here is whatever those changes are, and I appreciate Trustee by asking you for this type of clarification, because I'm not sure that us just taking this out of the way that the grade is presented necessarily would mean that it needs to come out, because we did hear from a lot of even grade school teachers that in grade school it does make sense for there to be more of those proficiency standards, but it's really when we're trying to acclimate them that they need that transition period, which would make sense. You're a child, we're making sure you get it, now we need to transition you to be ready for college. So I think that all makes sense, but I just don't believe that this policy is so black and white, because we didn't switch this policy until 2018 and we were still doing standards-based in elementary. So really, what does this change?
Yeah, Chair Kirkman, Trustee Taylor. Yes, absolutely. You would still teach to standards, and ideally you would create lessons and assessments around standards. It's reporting out learning, I think would depend on department and teachers and how they report that out, whether that's through points or through some form like that. But the idea of having essential standards, developing lessons to those standards, teaching to those standards, giving feedback to those standards, looking at data whether students have achieved those standards, developing tiered levels of instruction to ensure that students have learned those standards. Those things all would continue, and we would continue to push those practices because those are best practices in all kids.
And the same thing with co-teaching and all of those other practices.
Yeah, Chair Kirkman, Trustee Taylor, yes, co-teaching is based around standards, and it's based around vocabulary and the acquisition of language and how that's done, and that would continue as well. And we would have some co-planning with the teacher as well to ensure that language acquisition is in all parts of instruction.
Trustee Simpson, I saw your hand go up. I didn't know if you wanted to say anything or if you're just scratching your head or something. I just don't want you to not have the opportunity to say something.
No, I was just, well, I don't know really what my question is, other than I'm wondering, because it is in policy, that if a motion were to be made, right, we would need to change policy, or possibly not, depending on how the board's feeling. And so what does that process, what does that board see this looking through? I mean, typically we do a first read and then at the soonest a second read and second and final. And I didn't pull up the policy on policies, but I'm looking for it now, which is why my hand went down.
Chairman trustee, I can pull that up and get it pulled up for you if you want. I would also add that policy that is in there was provided to you from ISBA model policy, and it was ran through legal. It was also aligned with your policy prior when it was being implemented in the elementary levels. So the policy that is the edited version is ISBA's model policy. It is also, I was trying to think of the large districts that are using it that have done it similarly, Coeur d'Alene's policy, but it has been ran through legal. ISB is legal, and it was similar to the exact policy prior to you guys converting over in 2018.
Thank you.
And with I'm pulling up your policy on reading policy. You can bypass and do it as a final reading the same evening, so that, especially with time of essence, so that it would help align the handbooks that are going to be presented at the August 8th meeting. There might need to be edits to those to align with whatever direction you guys go into.
Okay.
I don't know. I don't have a feel for this board. And so normally I'm not afraid to make a motion that doesn't get seconded and move through. But I'm not going to make a motion because I'm not sure how you guys are all feeling. My concern is a little bit of what Trustee Taylor was saying and Trustee Valle were bringing up is also losing some autonomy, right? Like if teachers wanted to keep doing standards-based grading or it was working for them, because we do have some, I believe it was Principal Chris that said like no one's complained in his building about it, but they had a very different approach to it. So I'm not going to say that means no one is complaining about it that has students that go to East Valley, but I'm not going to make those generalizations, but I'm wondering, I hope we don't make a decision that decides something for everyone overarching. Hopefully we've learned, if nothing else in the last few years, that parents want choice and they want, they don't want us to make decisions for them.
Right.
Trustee Valier, you look like you want to say something.
Yes, I know parents want choice, but they also want consistency. And I think with regards to grading, we need to maintain some type of consistency that makes sense for the majority, because we can't please everybody.
Trustee Taylor?
Yeah, Chair Kirkman, I just want to verify really quick. When I'm reading through the grading and progress report, so
Which one are you on?
Clerk Lamont, it's the, hold on one second.
It,
It's the draft policy 2620 without standards-based grading.
yes, that's correct.
So here, if we were to change, or if this is the policy that you're giving us, it says the board believes that the cooperation of school and home is a vital ingredient in the growth of education of the student and recognizes the responsibility to keep parents informed of student welfare and progress in school. I wholeheartedly believe that. I need to add. But here it says the issuance of grades and progress reports on a regular basis serves as the basis for continuous evaluation of the student's performance and for determining changes that should be made to affect improvement. These reports shall be designed to provide information that will be helpful to the student, teacher, counselor, and parent. That to me seems a bit broad. So I think that to me seems like it would allow us that longitude as long as grades are being provided, as long as progress reports are being sent out. We're not necessarily saying anything at all about the standards to which we're teaching. We're just simply talking about the grading system of this policy. Is that correct?
That's absolutely correct.
Well, what would the grading system be? according to this, if this proposed policy, what would the grading, would that be up to district staff to?
I think that is up to the board to decide if you're going to delegate that and what kind of motion that you would make. Right now, I think it just depends on the motion. You have sample motions that have been provided to you as requested. There's one in there that says to accept the policy as being edited with the standard-based grading removed, first and final reading, and that the district edit all secondary procedures of the handbook so that standard-based grading is removed from secondary as well. I believe that was the discussion, the request we made to have a compromise to keep it in elementary, but yet the standard-based grading and yet convert it over to a traditional base for the secondary. But that doesn't mean you have to do it. You can modify any
Right.
motion. So then that's where you get more directives.
And I think that, I'm not necessarily looking for compromise. I want to make sure that the district finishes what they started with the standard-based grading. I know, you can throw COVID in there and whatever else in there, but I just don't see it working for secondary schools. Now, people I've talked to or in elementary said it works fine, and Trustee Taylor alluded to this also. Why couldn't we use elementary schools to hone standards-based grading process a little bit more? And even look at some measurables a year down the road or after this year and see what that might look like. And if that's possible, I mean, I don't know. I'm just kind of throwing stuff out there because I do see some value. I do see the value in standards-based grading and learning the content. I get all that. That is not lost on me whatsoever. But it is that transition period into secondary schools and that preparation for life after. And there is a timeline actually, and I was listening to Trustee Simpson talk about this, and that timeline is 3 to 4 years when they get into secondary school about what is life going to be like afterwards. And so, and that's where parents really start to get antsy when they don't know what the kids' grades are or where that assessment is at. So I don't know if there's a way that the district could maybe look at keeping the elementary and using that kind of as a continued pilot, if you will. I'm throwing words out there and really hone in on the measurables and really hone in on the effect and so on and so on.
Chairman Kirkman, sorry. I feel like part of what I heard from Mr. Yarbrough this evening was similar to that, in that this freshman cohort this year is the first group of students that have had it through elementary, and maybe a focus needs to be there. I don't know. I hear what you're saying, like maybe the continuance needs to be there.
And Chairman Kirkman, I use the word compromise due to the presentation by Deputy Superintendent Yarborough, not because I felt like you guys were trying to make that. I used that particular word because it was used in the presentation.
Dr. Russell?
Yeah, so Chair Kirkman, trustees, again, don't have a crystal ball, but can say that we operated with standards-based grading at the elementary level for 2014, 2015, 2016, 2017, and 2018. With secondaries used a variety of systems. So I think that's possible. And as far as secondaries, as I mentioned previously, we really like to talk to our administrators, but the idea of having standards, teaching standards, assessing the standards, I foresee us would be reporting out all grades in the Power School as we have in the past, all reports going into Power School, teachers using Teacher Pro. Some teachers who would want to continue with the standards-based approach with the proficiency scales, I'm only predicting, but they would probably continue doing that and somehow use a point system to show whether students have learned material or not. I think that's what they did prior. And so they'd probably fall back to something like that. And then your more traditional teachers would use your classic 100 points for this assignment, 80 points for this assignment, 15 points for this assignment. Probably look something like that.
Okay, well, trustees?
I have a motion to accept policy 2620 as being edited with the standard-based grading removal remove first and final reading, and that the district edit all secondary procedures and handbooks so that standard-based grading is removed from the secondary as well.
I second that motion with, so we can talk about it.
Can I hear that motion one more time?
Accept policy.
Excuse me, trustee clerk, do you have that? Will you read that
Oh,
back, please?
Yes, it's I believe it's the same motion in the packet to accept policy 2620 as being edited with the standard-based grading removed, first and final reading, and the district edit all secondary procedures and handbooks so that standard-based grading is removed from secondary as well.
Okay, it's been motioned and seconded. Now, it's been motioned by trustee Pearson, seconded by trustee Valier. Is there any discussion on that motion, trustee Valier?
Yeah, please remind me, because my memory is a little bit clear right now. I got so many things going. I really like what trustee Taylor said, that there's a need to keep it. I feel also there's a need to keep it in the elementary schools. So this does that. Okay. Thank you.
So this motion is only removing for secondary schools.
That's up to the board.
I mean, is that
think-
what this motion is saying? That's what this motion is saying. I want to make sure I got the wording right, because it's a
Yeah.
little bit confusing.
Chair Cookman,
Trustee Taylor.
here's where I'm just struggling with. So to accept policy 2620 as being edited with the standard-based grading removed first and final reading, and that the district edit all secondary procedures and handbooks so that the standards-based grading is removed from secondary as well.
It's as well.
Well, and I'm trying to understand too, all secondary procedures and handbooks. So, and this is where I was talking about when we go from a standards-based grade, because it can be calculated into a letter grade. And so if teachers want to continue to teach to that standard and have to provide a grade, am I saying then that they couldn't? Because I think that what everybody is saying and understanding is that we want standards taught, makes sense. So I'm just, go ahead.
I was gonna say Superintendent Russell can answer that, but you are, the staff is still required to align everything with the state standards. And so this is just taking the grading mechanism out, but he would need to talk about how they would align that with the grading, not myself.
Okay, and then the secondary procedures, what is that referencing?
Chair Kirkman, trustee Taylor, procedures, I mean, I'm assuming that's talking about the handbook. And there is some information in around standards-based grading in the handbook. I believe that would have to be edited out if I'm interpreting that motion correctly. And what likely would do is we would look at an older handbook prior to 2018, and probably use some language around that to add that in our grading. I'm looking at some administrators there just to see if I'm on the right page or not. I think that's probably with the time frame we're in, is the action that we would.
So to accept policy 2620 as being edited with standards-based grading remove first and final reading, that the district edit all secondary, because it says procedures and handbooks. So you're saying that they're one and the same. That's what I don't like is
Not necessarily. I mean, there could be a procedure at one school that might be a little bit different in implementing standard-based grading than there might be at another school.
And not all the procedures and handbooks have been brought to the board. They could just have those procedures that are updated to the board, so just aligning them.
I have I would imagine there's a large number of teachers that have been here before standard grade. SBGE was brought on, so they would understand already, know how to use the grading system. So training would be not as difficult for them.
Trustee Kirkman.
Trustee Simpson.
I think, yeah, my only thing here is, as a board, it's our job to write the policy, but it's not necessarily our job to write the procedures for the school. So I think if we change the policy, then it's the superintendent and his administration and the principals at those buildings to update their procedures to match the policy.
Correct, and that's where I was a little bit confused and why we're getting into procedures
Right.
and handbooks. Let's just, and I gotta be careful not to make because we have a motion on the table, which we could, but we're still in discussion on this motion. I mean, is there a way to clarify the motion, being very specific as, I mean, if you want to remove standards-based grading from secondary schools, do so. Put it in the motion and leave it for elementary and let the district staff implement that policy change. That's just what I'm thinking.
Would you
Yeah.
guys like to make an amendment to your motion or edit it?
It's her motion. Yeah. You can make it.
I'm sorry, no.
Chair Kirkman, I'd like to propose an amendment.
Let's go ahead.
I move that we approve the draft policy 2620 with the removal of the wording for standards-based grading for first and final read.
I second, as long as we're talking about, sorry, I second for discussion.
I just think in doing so, it allows our elementary folks and teams to continue to do standards-based grading if they so choose. Give some autonomy if it's something that is working in some secondary classrooms and areas or content areas. It's just a matter of here's what needs to happen.
Okay, before we move forward, let me just stop everything here because it looks like we're in the discussion on this motion. It hasn't been seconded though. Okay. I just want
No,
to
I seconded for discussion.
okay, so I just want to make sure I know where we're at. So this motion, this amended motion by trustee Simpson has been moved and it has been seconded by trustee Taylor. Any discussion on that motion?
Yeah, so here's the discussion. So I felt that first one was too specific and that it got into the weeds with the procedures and the handbooks, because we'll have to approve the handbooks later, so these are gonna come down to us anyway. With this particular one right here, the issuance of grades and progress reports on a regular basis serves as the basis for continuous evaluation of the student's performance and determining changes. That's what I'm asking. Sorry, Mandy, tell me which one you read. Because was it draft policy 2620 without standards-based grading?
She read this motion, but she had amended this motion. Can you read that back?
It was, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
I just was referencing the draft policy without standards-based grading language.
What I'm reading. And so that's why I want to make sure in the second part of it, I want to be specific here as well, where it says the issuance of grades and progress reports on a regular basis serves as the basis for continuous evaluation of students' performance and for determining changes that should be made to affect improvement. These reports shall be designed to provide information that will be helpful to the student, teacher, counselor, and parent. So I just want to make sure that we're not, like, it's not a double-edged sword and we're not, right? Like I can see at this moment in time for secondary, this just isn't working. It's intended to do something great. It's just not.
But that's not what trustee Simpson's motion was.
This is her motion. Her motion is to approve this draft policy first and final read that I just read you.
But to allow secondary schools to continue if they so choose.
And that's what I'm asking. And that's what I'm
You
asking.
seconded it.
Well, but I think she said so that they can. I don't think this was her wording that she said to choose. And that's why I said I'm seconding for discussion, because that's what I want to ask. If we approve this, then I think that language would need to be changed, because I can discuss this after. That's why I seconded it. But that's what I'm saying. So I think that this policy does some of what we want, or what I want. Some of what I want or what I see working, but not enough, whereas I think that one's too overreaching.
Can I withdraw my amendment?
Does trustee Taylor withdraw her amendment?
Yes.
I just want to get us talking to get down what we're looking for.
Still a motion on the table.
Okay,
I just withdrew.
what
No.
motion now?
We have not voted, I'm sorry.
There's a
Chairman,
motion,
Board of
it was
Trustees,
amended.
Can I
Hold
speak
on
on
just a second, let me,
clarification?
hold on just a second, and then you clarify what I
Okay.
restate. There was a motion, it was seconded by trustee Valier. That motion was amended by trustee Simpson.
We never called for a vote to amend it.
I
so
know,
it was
that's
not.
where I was,
Right,
that's.
so
we
that
needed to
one is
make
now
sure.
withdrawn, so now we still have the motion, the first motion on the table to accept policy 2620 as being edited with the standard base grading removed, first and final reading, and that the district edit all secondary procedures and handbooks so that the standard base grading is removed from, it should be from them as well.
Thank you.
So that motion is still on the table.
And that was trustee Pearson's
And
original
Valier.
motion,
Yes.
and it was still seconded by
We just
trustee
haven't called for
Valier.
the vote.
I know, I want to make sure I'm running through this process so we all know where we're at. And then trustee Simpson withdrew her motion in the second. So we're back to trustee Pearson's motion, and we have a second. Is there any discussion on that motion further?
I think that we stopped with discussion being, is it an overreach for us to say the first and final reading that the district edit all secondary procedures and handbooks of the standards-based grading is removed from that? That's where that conversation went.
They still have to bring it back to the board for approval, so I don't think it's overreaching, you're just directing in that motion.
Okay.
That makes sense. I'm good.
Okay, no further discussion on that motion?
Man, I have some,
Does this motion keep standards-based grading in elementary schools?
Yes, that's what it's been said.
yes.
I think that's some of the directives you need to be clear about.
Yes, very.
Does
moving-
this motion allow for individual teachers at the secondary level to do standards-based grading?
No,
No.
this motion does not.
No,
Not for individual teachers. It's across the board secondary schools
for grading.
for grading.
They have to do that now to graduate them. Yeah.
So we have to take a vote.
You need to make sure you're
you-
speaking into your microphone so we can hear
Right.
you.
Trustee Pearson, did you
Sorry.
have a question for the clerk?
So with this motion, if there was a teacher who liked the standard base, like the 1, 2, 3, but they would still have to come with a letter, right? Because they're standards. To me,
Trustees, superintendent, I think that's a question for superintendent. They will still be utilizing the standards. I believe the procedure about how they'll be grading will be in the secondary handbook. That will identify that because that's where it's currently at. So they still have to teach to the standards. And I think that's what you're trying to say, Tracy.
yes.
Trustee Pearson, I'm
Because
so
I
sorry.
think we need clarity on this motion.
They-
Some-
They still
Some
have
of
to
the
teach to the
trustees.
standards no matter what. This is on grading, not the teaching. Is that
Yes.
correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, any others? I think if we have any more discussion, we'll get more. Okay,
I need more clarity.
I will, so there's a motion and a second. All in favor? Any opposed?
Nay.
So Clerk Lamont, will you please read back if you can, if you're at that point,
Mhm.
what was, I want to make it very crystal clear, and then if we need to provide some directives for staff so that they understand what the board is directing them to do.
The motion was, that passed, so the motion is passed. To accept policy 2620 as being edited with the standard-based grading removed as first and final reading, and that the district edit all secondary procedures and handbooks so that standard-based grading is removed from them as well. Directives moving forward. Staff will still teach to the standards as required by law, and they have and elementary will continue with standard-based grading. This is just what the bullet points I have as directives that I'm supposed to do after each board meeting.
Right.
And then the handbooks will be edited, and then you guys will go from there on what the grading will look like. in the handbooks, because that's where it's currently at. Because it wasn't identified in this policy, it's always been in the handbooks.
Chair Kirkland.
Yes.
So clarification, Clerk Lamont, our new policy will read the board, the policy 2620 as written.
The one that you've been reading, that's in the packet of, I
Will
think it's
will you
that-
pull that
is it
up,
that?
Zane?
Same, sorry. The draft policy, if you could click that one, it will be written like this and updated into the board policy manual include and that's on the website within 24 hours. I just need to get through tonight and then I'll have it updated by then.
Thank you.
Questions will come up. Does this allow for for teachers to, never mind. I withdraw my statement, my question. No, so any further directives that we need, any clarification, Dr. Russell, you may need from the board on this motion or decision?
Sure, trustees, yeah, I probably will have questions. There will probably be quite a few questions. I need to talk with some folks and I might need to bring some of those questions back to get some clarity with the board. I anticipate there'll be quite a few questions.
Superintendent trustees, as per law, once the motion is passed, they can email and ask for clarification moving forward as in their
Sure.
administrative role, so they can do that.
Tell us how you want this implemented
Yes.
or help us
Help us
get this
implement it
implemented,
with
yeah.
your intent, yes.
The intent, yes, tell us what your intent was. Okay, very good. All right. With that, we are adjourned at 8:30.